ce soir.
Ça?
J'espère. There's always a portion memory.
Mais before.
Before?
Oui, avant. It's a good surprise on stage with the different musicians. Like that.
Every time.
Every time.
Mostly the best memory is a très current. So, I guess you could say all of your time on the stage is a bon memory. C'est un bon souvenir. Tout le temps sur le stage, c'est un bon souvenir.
Et what do you think the French audience alors?
I think the French audience is very eclectic. But it's not only, in a club like this, it's not only Francais. A lot of times you see many different people from different parts of the world come here to hear jazz. The French or the audience in Paris is very similar to the audience in New York City. Or maybe if you're in New York, you see many French people. Then you come to Paris, you see many Americans. And you see many. It's sort of like a.
Oui.
You know what I'm saying? You go to America, maybe you see more French people listening to jazz in America than you see French people listening to jazz in France for some reason. Sometimes. But I think the French audience is very generous, very dedicated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that too.
Is this better in Europe for the jazz musician?
See, depend on votre point of your view. If you think in terms of euro, yes, it's better.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean,
No, but for the because in America there's a lot of rap music, there's a lot of country music. It is very important for the records and for the artists. Mais for the jazz and blues, it's very too difficult now.
Difficulty. It depends on what you think is difficult.
Okay.
If you're dedicated to your music, nothing is difficult.
Okay.
The first thing is what's coming from your heart, and from your personal dedication to your music and your instrument. And if you hold true to this axiom, it's like dominoes. You will never have a problem to be creative. I could live on Mars and have the same type of creativity that I have here. Today it's like that. I mean, we just don't sit in one place and say, okay, I'm okay. Maybe if you're very sedentary, you stay in one place, it's not good. Musicians have to move.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us should not live in the same place for a long time. I mean, I grew up in America. I raised a family in France. I spent several years in Turkey, and I feel very fortunate to be able to experience different cultures and to have a. It's very current now to see someone as not just from one place. A good example is Obama. I mean, one of his big pluses about him is that he lived in different places. He didn't just grow up in Chicago. He lived in Indonesia. Things like that.
Alors for the new generation, the younger musician, which the musician you like for the new generation?
I appreciate all of the musicians of the younger generation.
You think it's possible qu'il y ait la suite the old musician and now is that the progression?
It depends on the industry. The music, the demand for music in America is very different from maybe the demand of the music in Europe.
Yeah.
And this is business concept. In America, you're expected to play standards. The recording companies, they have this whole formula that if you play standards, A good example of that is some of the older musicians that are still playing today. They have a giant archive of many standards they've recorded on their records. And America is basically based, or at least the recording industry is based in the 70s and the 80s, and even now in the 90s. Good point is if you look at James Brown made a standard record.
Yeah.
And maybe some other people too, very current. The guys, they spend their whole career doing something else, and then they say, oh, you should make a record of standards. Who else did it? Rod Stewart. Right?
Yeah.
And so this phenomena even affects people like that don't need to do that.
Yeah.
But for a jazz musician, it's more intensified because we're not James Brown, we're not Rod Stewart, we don't have this whole other catalog of music that we're making our
It's
living
different.
off of. Here in Europe, it's not like that because the maison, the publishing, is in America.
Exactly.
And maybe a few people filter here to do that, like Dee Bridgewater or Diana Krell. But it's not obligatory for the younger French cats to do that. Well, even though they will, maybe just the equivalent is for the younger French cats to maybe some guys are playing bebop and other guys are playing more mainstream music and some other guys are playing avant-garde, but there's a little bit more choice. Here, because we don't have this maison de disc pressure, there's not a big giant maison de disc pressure in Europe, because there's not a big network of radio stations and things like that to diffuse the music that you do, like in America. And all of this plays into the type of music that you play. New York City, a place like the Duc de Lombard is very different. Except if you're a more established musician and you have your identity established, but it's very difficult for a younger musician to establish his own identity when he has these pressures, publishing house pressures and things like that, to do standards. And some people say, well, okay, I'm just going to play standards and matrix my career like that. But it's not. You have a little bit more freedom here in Europe to not have to deal with that.
What are your advice for the young musician? He's in the beginning, he's play sax. What's your advice?
Advice. Listen to as much music as you can. Play as much as you can. Interact with your peers. Interact with your mentors. This is very important.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot. The big problem today with younger musicians is they think they can do everything by themselves. And this comes out in the music. And you have to have born influence. And you have to have humility to accept these influences and to perpetrate the perpetuality of a certain type of culture. Now, if you're living in Europe, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to do this type of cultural assimilation because the music comes from America. It's like that, but with perseverance and humility is the biggest thing. I mean, just because you have a good facility on your instrument, you're working, you're making money, sometimes this might diminish somebody's humility and they think that they're successful and they don't have to have a certain type of humility to understand this thing. And this is endemic, it's endemic in the music world.
It's very important.
And so, for this type of music that we're playing, the humility is very important in your music. I think one of the most humble musicians that we could ever know is Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah.
He was very humble in his approach to music.
You're talking in a Conbesi, et maintenant I am a good friend of Bobby Durham. Et Bobby, c'est vraiment a good friend together.
We just worked together. I just worked together with Bobby.
Yeah. I doing the movies and.
I just played with him 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw him.
With Tony Monaco. We had a ball. I mean, I've known Bobby Durham for many years. I used to see him with Ella Fitzgerald.
C'est the same generation. C'est vraiment
I had such a good time working with Bobby.
He sings very, very good.
Huh?
He sings very, very, very
Yeah,
good.
but he's too tasteful.
Yeah,
Well,
that's okay.
too much taste.
Yeah.
He's a bad cat.
I got the chance with Rhoda Scott because I work with Rhoda. The surprise on Bobby, I have 2 days ago in Marshall Plus the record on Oscar Peterson. Et je vois, I see Bobby Durham.
Yeah.
Et Rhoda, 2 days after, Rhoda, I present you Bobby Durham. She said, nah, it's possible the interview tomorrow. We stay the Paris. Et après, we stay the contact together.
Well, I worked with Bobby and
Yeah,
Rhoda.
I'm Bobby. With Bobby.
With Bobby and Rhoda, we worked in Spain
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks ago.
It's very good, great drummer.
He's too heavy.
Yeah.
Taste.
Yeah.
Everything is happening.
Et c'est the same thing there last week avec Brian Blade, drummer.
Yeah.
See, the imagination for the spirit is incredible on stage when he's playing on the drums to change the symbol, snake drum, incredible. It's a good surprise because I know him for 6 years.
Uh-huh.
I saw him when shorter. I doing the great picture. I leaving the picture for him September last year. Et il m'a dit, for me? Je dis, yeah. Thank you, Jean-Paul, it's possible. Give me your contact. Je dis, okay, I give you a contact. He give me give them. It's a surprise last week. You are, come on with me. It's very great. The heart. Bobby Few! Oh, Bobby!
Hey.
Bobby! My
Hello,
name
man.
is
Got an
Jean-Paul.
interview?
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, okay. Got an interview?
Oui, j'ai fait
Interview?
une petite interview.
Yeah.
Oui.
Excuse-moi.
C'est petit. Non, come on.
If you want to do
sit
the
down.
second part,
You want to?
Not for the moment.
Bad.
c'est comme ça.
Okay,
When
tout
I
le monde.
do, I go like this so it doesn't go on accident.
So,
Didn't always try.
Bobby!
Bobby,
Hello.
Simone, yeah. Bobby.
Got the banana out.
I took it without the flash. I took it without the flash.
Uh-oh.
Pas trop loin. Je me réveille. Body answer because ça devait être the best
Oh,
moment.
yeah.
I'm sure.
Merci pour la bonne introduction, Jean-Michel Proust. Bienvenue.